think it's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there a timetable with this group, or is there, you guys set up?
We haven't. I just kind of see how we, the next few months, where we're at, see if we're getting anything done or wasting our time. But I think we can get something done, to everybody's satisfaction.
Do we need a motion to accept?
Yeah.
I so move. Accept the mission statement.
Does somebody want a second?
I second it.
All right, all in favor? No, there we go. Good, here we go. Goals and objectives. Okay, why don't we go right down the list? Do you want to lead that part, Paul?
So this packet isn't. This is just an example, or this is a definition of each type of aquaculture. So your LPA.
Yep. Does everybody understand these license qualifications? Should we start with that?
We can. Yep. So your first page is DMR did a good job at outlining kind of a quick sheet of what each type of aquaculture license or lease is. So you can go down there and just see, how many square feet or how many acres something can have, what the term limit is. I don't need to read these verbatim, but you can see it's kind of a quick fact sheet. Your first real basic type of aquaculture license, in this case, is called a limited purpose aquaculture license. It's up to 400 square feet. They're renewable every year. One person cannot have more than 4. And this is typically what people get into when they're first starting aquaculture. They're just kind of getting their feet wet, figuring out what works, maybe where they want to go if their water conditions are right for them. There's a lot of things that go into folks determining where they're going to put their LPAs in this process. Experimental would be the next step, kind of moving towards that standard lease. So experimental is a duration of 3 years. They have it to 4 acres. This is kind of where DMR starts putting a little bit more investigative resources into it. They'll go out and do a survey or
site evaluation.
Site evaluation.
Yeah.
This is where you don't always get a public hearing. There has to be a certain amount of people that will request a public hearing.
Yeah.
Whereas the standard, it's an automatic public hearing. So I think as we go through, we'll learn, what triggers public hearings and how do we get to that point. And then as you move up, standard lease is the last last category of a lease. These are up to 100 acres for up to 20 years. Again, these are mandatory public hearings. These have the full-blown DMR evaluations and surveys. And at this point, they can take up to almost, 2 years is where they're at, 2.5 years to come to a conclusion. Just because how backed up they are with everything. If you go further in your packet, it just tells you how or what is renewable, what's transferable, what can be amended. Certain applications cannot be any of those. Some can have all of them. What is aquaculture public hearing? It kind of tells you what happens during a public hearing and how to participate.
David can tell you about that, can't you, David?
Yeah. Tell you the dark side of it.
And then how to submit public comment. And again, we'll get through all of this. I think we'll get really into the nitty gritty in future meetings. But at the very end of your package is just frequently asked questions. This is all from the DMR website. So I think familiarize yourself with the different types of aquaculture and understand what goes where and how big something can be, and determine what kind of goals and objectives you want to include based on that information.
Well, Well, what I'd like to see, our main goals and objectives is Harpswell should establish their own criteria list
Slide that mic over, Dave.
on top of what DMR already has in place. I think we need to identify constricted currents in every body of water, and a proposal should not impede the ebb and flow within that constricted current. And I think more than anything, we need to identify existing fisheries and honor those existing fisheries. I mean, it might be getting a little more in depth, but like I wish that you were required to go through a process where LPA, then an experimental, then a standard. Reason be, an experimental, like if you want to define an experimental, that gives you the chance to explore what your footprint, your goals are going to be on that footprint, how that immediate area and environment is going to react. And I don't think it should be 3 years. I think it should be like 4 or 5 years. I mean, some species of shellfish you can't even grow in 3 years. So, yeah, that's my goals and objectives. If we're going to exploit Harpswell's waters, let's do it and create a harmonic balance. If it's not going to complement that body of water, then yeah, I don't know.
Where does that start?
Where's that?
What you just proposed?
Where does it start?
Well,
I don't know really.
Did this town do her own studies?
Well, I mean, identifying constricted currents, no, you don't. Identifying existing fisheries and honoring those, that's going to take a little bit of work on both sides. But no, honestly, like, I don't know where to start, Kevin. I wish I did, but yeah.
All right.
Can I ask, David, were you saying you'd like to see the process always include the start with the lease, then go to the next step, then go to the next step? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, so, okay, and I had another question, but I forgot what it is. Oh, the existing fisheries?
Yes.
There was talk about doing some mapping. Is
Yep.
that starting
Yeah.
already?
Yep.
I think he just popped.
Oh, okay.
Pop this up, but I think like a good place to start, obviously, will be to go through more extensively map existing fisheries, and constricted currents and whatever, places that you think are places that, aquaculture could thrive and be, balanced with, just to do a more extensive mapping than what's been done in the past, and then that kind of gives us something to look at and say, okay, here yes, here no, and be able to provide feedback to DMR that they will hopefully abide by, because that's kind of the ultimate goal, is to come up with something that they will. Because it doesn't really matter what we do if DMR doesn't listen to it, or
but that's why we did this committee. I think
Right.
it'd give the town a voice.
right, yeah. So, because in the past it's been, when it comes to these leases, there's 7 for an experimental lease. There's 7 criteria. There's the 8 for the standard lease. Those 8 criteria, it says the legal criteria for granting a standard lease, aquaculture lease, that they must not unreasonably interfere with the following. But really, it's that they legally can't not grant the lease unless it does.
Yeah.
It's a very, very fine set of criteria, and if it doesn't unreasonably interfere with one of those things, then they have no choice but to grant the lease.
Yeah.
And who determines what unreasonable interference is, I don't know, because I've been to public hearings for aquaculture leases where multiple fishermen have stood up and said, I think fish here, I've fished here for years. This is going to be detrimental to the area, to my business, and apparently it wasn't deemed unreasonable to, granted. So it's coming up with something that hopefully will have enough of an impact to. We have to be able to show that we have to keep these criteria in mind when we're working, so that we can have proof and show that it does unreasonably interfere with one of these things in order for it to not be in that area that we've said it shouldn't be in.
I think one thing we need to do is research, along with that, and that will back up, like why we say it doesn't belong in that area if we have research backing that up. And I've reached out to the Jared and Holly that run the Shearer Center down there on Orr's Island, and they're willing to do some of the research for us. They just need to know what we want, basically, So, I think that's something. And then we have something cold and hard that we can present to DMR and say, look, it can't be here because this is where there's a shellfish bed, and here's the research showing that it's detrimental to shellfish beds, And it's kind of hard, I think, for them to deny it if you have scientific fact.
Kind of have to have something. Unless they're, I would hope that, if we as a town, go through the map and come up with a better map and have it in our ordinance that says this is how the uses that we want, that they would just kind of abide by that and not want to, pick a fight.
So I will say, I'll give you a little bit of hope here.
Yeah.
So there was an individual who had applied for 4 LPAs down off Wallace Shore. You can see it's in green, which is I think 3 waters. It said aquaculture wouldn't be a good spot for it. We brought it to the Harpswell Waterfront Committee, and this map is an ordinance, right? So it's kind of like you're flirting a fine line if you don't go by that.
Right.
So I submitted this to the state saying, listen, it's already been determined by the voters of Harpswell for this not to be a good spot, and DMR upheld that.
Yeah.
It was petitioned by that applicant, and the committee. It was found to not be unreasonable where the exact placement was, and I think even the committee understood that, the Harbor Committee. So it was reversed, but DMR did uphold that initial because they said the voters of Harpswell have already done the work, done the legwork.
Yeah.
Approved that.
Ideally, that would be the case, and they wouldn't go against us on that. Otherwise, like you said, you'd have to actually have, the real, like, as far as saying that there's already lobstering going on in an area, you'd have to go out and take pictures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Beyond just having a map and an ordinance, because that's what the applicants have to do, right? That's what the applicants go out, they take a picture, there's no buoys there, it's the middle of winter. And then, 3 times a year, and there's no buoys there, and it's like, oh, there's no fishing occurs here. Unless you have pictures to show the opposite, then there's no.
And granted, updating this map and identifying fishing grounds, if someone still wants to pursue an area in one of these, on these fishing grounds, that brings them in front of us, we get to hear them out, find out what type of lease they're venturing, and who knows, you still might be suitable for that particular area, but at least, it gives everybody, all interested parties, a chance, and I don't know, I think that even after we have these fishing grounds highlighted, if someone is that interested in at least come in front of us and, hash things over and find out exactly what they want to do.
Does every application go before Harbor and Waterways?
So this is something that we have. Let me start over. LPAs, as soon as they come to me, I make sure they go out to. We have a mailing list of everyone that wanted to be notified. Email mailing list, and the Harbor Committee for subtitle and intertidal goes directly to marine resources. One thing we've talked to DMR about is we think, and maybe this group could be a leader in that, is forcing applicants to talk to the municipalities for experimental and standards first, because if they may waste money and time submitting applications that we had one that came to the harbor committee, and the harbor committee's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you know, we fish through there constantly. The boaters go through there constantly." And we relayed that back to DMR, and unfortunately, that likely is going to cost this person a lot of money and application fees. And they could have waited to submit that application if they had just come talk to the town first.
Yeah. It is a frustrating part of that. I mean, you know, obviously they have a whole process laid out, but it's frustrating for everybody involved when you've got somebody that, you know, you see an application for a lease and it's like, well, that's not going to work. So now whoever's using it already is mad. And you try and have a conversation with the applicant about it, and they're mad because they've already gone through all this work and done, you know, money. So the more local input, the earlier, definitely would help the process.
Yeah.
So would a goal, one would be a harmonic balance, that could be a goal, and then under that. And another would be to establish a system where the town's involved early on. Not that, at this point, we can't require that, but that could be a goal to develop and get DMR to. Another goal I have is to look at what else is happening, like was brought up at the first working group, and I don't know if the workshop. I don't know if it came up at the second one, but what Georgetown's doing. Done a little research on it. I'd like to know a lot more about it. So that's the kind of thing I would love to invite somebody to come and talk to us about. They're doing something really different. I don't think it's anybody else is doing it, and it's effective. So that and whatever else, I don't know what else, but that would be a goal I have.
Yeah, a lot of these people run those are in the lobster business.
Right.
In Georgetown.
Right.
Because things aren't going well, so they started a program. They came and talked to us once. I forget which committee now.
Yeah, Dana Morse can fill you in on it.
Oh.
Yep. What's going on in Georgetown?
Would you like to, come on off the table, if you'd like.
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't expect to speak, but my name is Dana Morse. I'm with the Maine Sea Grant Program and Humane Cooperative Extension. I should show my colors here. You should also know that I am a leaseholder, just so that you know who's talking. And the town of Georgetown, I'll try to condense it down. They looked through their comprehensive planning and they saw shrinking population, fewer working waterfront families, and they were looking for ways to kind of help that out. They kind of looked around at different marine industries and they hit on aquaculture, shellfish production as a way to kind of do those things. And so they created a whole set of bylaws. They had a couple of donors to help people get into the industry at a little bit of scale. It's like you don't have to pay any money back for 2 or 3 years. And they made provisions so that if you're not functioning well as a farmer, you can get kicked out, basically. But they also made provisions for new people to come in. And so that was a big thing for them. They were really concerned about, yes, they wanted to have an industry that allowed for people to still make a living on the water, but they also paid a lot of attention to the future generations down the road. That's the heart of it.
What was it that was is that like operating outside of the DMR leasing program, or did those farmers still have to apply?
They still had to do that. The cooperative owns, I think it's, don't quote me, but I think it's about 14 acres.
Oh, okay.
And
So it's a cooperative, and then these farmers are operating within that cooperative.
Yes, and I think the number of farms in there is 10 or 11 or so, all of whom are either shellfish harvesters, lobster industry people, or come from a working waterfront family.
Yeah, and so the town took out the lease for that cooperative,
The co-op holds the lease.
and the co-op being those 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the thing that I'll finish up here is that they made They made their bylaws, they wrote their rules according to what worked for them. And what I find interesting as an extension person is that any community or group can kind of do the same and make the rules up that work for them in a different place. And if you're interested in this, I would suggest having some of their members come in and tell you about it. Maybe the president, who's a guy named Stephen Mace, and a fellow named Pat Burns, who was really instrumental in getting that going. They could tell you much more clearly than I could, but I can give you the generalities of it.
Okay.
Thanks.
No, thanks. Well, actually, one more question for you.
Sure.
How did they pick their areas? How does their classification work? That's one of the biggies for us.
Yeah, I don't know precisely, because I did not sit in with that group, but I know that they looked at the criteria. Since they all come from fishing families, they know the activities there, the commercial activities and the recreational activities. They did take a course that I'm involved in, a training course called Aquaculture in Shared Waters, so they got some nuts and bolts things about how to grow shellfish, and part of that has to do with site selection. How do you choose a site, and how do you talk to your neighbors, and what not to do, that kind of stuff.
We have a lot of people from outside of town coming here, just because of the waters we have.
Yeah.
Obviously.
They definitely encountered that, people who are not familiar with the fact that in Georgetown's also used to be working waterfront, and people who are not used to what it's like living in a working waterfront town. They have that too.
Yeah, we had 6 applications out on a little whaleboat. They identified from, what was it, January to April, that there was no fishing going on, so they thought it was a safe place to put aquaculture. In the meantime, you go to a little whaleboat, you can walk on top of the buoys.
Roger. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, anybody else?
On that note, is there any way that we can put, this is walking a fine line here,
No.
I'd like to see precedent put on residents getting a lease over non-residents. If we're gonna be leasing out the waters of Harpswell, I think the residents of Harpswell should be getting first dibs, because they're the ones that, like that gentleman just said, the fishermen and the residents understand what goes on here far better than somebody from Portland, Massachusetts, or some other town. But I'm not sure if that's something that we can even write into an ordinance without being called discriminatory.
Don't quote me, but I think there is a provision for shorefront property owners to do something, whether maybe it's LPA.
Yeah.
There's something.
But when
we
it
can
comes to
find
the
it.
regular lease, I mean, you just, DMR, I don't think would,
They don't care.
no, because
Well,
it's state waters.
It's state
Right.
waters,
Right.
yeah.
Our waters are state waters,
Right.
and they're not gonna.
They're gonna trump anything we have.
Well,
So-
again, that's why I'm interested in Georgetown, because they did figure out a way.
Well, that's
Right.
just in
It's a
one
small
14,
area,
that's just in
that's
one, well, I mean, 14-acre lease is a big, is it one 14-acre lease?
I think they have a couple of different tracks.
Okay. So, I mean, that's just in, within those, but that's not the only aquaculture going on in Georgetown. It's not, that co-op is all the aquaculture in Georgetown, there's farms, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be one of our goals to get a co-op together. I don't think that's
No.
the goal here.
No,
It's not to create
No.
our own lease or town lease. I don't think that's a goal of ours, or should be. I don't think.
no.
No, I mean, I think focusing on where good places to set up farms would be. I mean, it's more helpful than anybody. If people wanted to form a co-op, you'd have to, the start is still
Yeah.
where's a good spot, right?
We need this map because as it stands right now, it's left up to the applicant and people that are in DMR's email loop.
Yeah.
You can find out after the fact and you fish there, your whole life, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there was that lease they got applied for on the southwest end of Lower Goose. That was like a 20-acre lease or whatever. Remember that one? It was Keith Butterfield.
Yep, I do.
And that was originally, from talking to him, that was supposed to be a co-op. He was taking out that lease so that he could run it as a co-op, which you kind of see because like all those little whaleboat LPAs were all employees of his, and I think that's kind of how, I don't know, there's some cooperative stuff going on there. I don't know, have you heard from any of those?
No,
applicants? No. I haven't heard from any of them.
Yeah, we did. Those were the ones we heard last week or last month, the ones that are on whaleboat.
Yes.
Yeah, we heard from them. They were all
Again,
buttons.
not-
I meant
Oh,
again
since,
about
no.
citing
Oh,
or-
no, we haven't heard from them again.
I haven't heard from any of them personally, but it was funny because I was at that meeting that night, and then I got home, and within half an hour getting home, that Keith Byfield called me up and wanted to sit down and have coffee, and I just realized the other day that I haven't got back to him, but he wanted to. So I don't know what kind of cooperative stuff's going on there, but anyways, how do we want to go about refining the map?
Just so everyone's aware here, so this is a very static map from 2011. The town's intern that they have for the summer has already started digitizing this on GIS, so he's going to get it to the group, or he'll get it to me and we'll get it to you guys in a format that can be edited through GIS. And it'll be in such a form that everyone can just go home and just play with it, and you can make your own adjustments, and it won't screw up the entire map. It'll just be, Chris, what do you have? Jerry, what do you have?
Yeah.
You can just keep overlaying and see what everyone's come up with.
I didn't know whether that sounds like with that technology, then it'd be easier. I didn't know if it'd be easier for us to, as a group, go through it, or whether it would be easier for us to do it individually and then try and bring it together.
That's up to you guys. I was sorry. I went a little ahead there. I was just trying to get the point across that the town is trying to digitize it right now.
Well,
How you guys want to go about
If we
it?
have that technology, then that's what we kind of pick away at stuff ourselves based on our own.
We have him for the summer. Just keep Mark Arman away from him. He was trying to poach him.
Are we giving it a criteria of, categorizing separate fisheries over the last decade? As you said, it's 13-year-old now. So, is this something when we go to put it down on the map, are we going to try to split this up for like overlaps on historical areas where we have multiple fisheries, which would weigh in heavier than an area that wasn't so? If you just got lobstering taking up in one area, but then you got seining, scalloping, and lobstering, that would take a higher mark than it would that of a single fishery. An overlap. Right now, it just says it's in commercial use or not, pretty much, for the most part. So, it's not really a defining feature, other than saying we've been there before. But when we start to see overlaps, that could be part of a weighting decision.
Well, right now we only have 4 classes essentially, so we may want to think about adding another 2 or something like that to,
Yeah,
like a level 1 fishery, level 2, level 3 or something like that. But
historically,
4 may not be enough to identify.
historically we got seining, we got lobstering, we got scallop, and we got lobstering. Am I correct? That's pretty much kind of 4, other than aquaculture. Yeah, then you got the shell fishery. Categorize-wise, I think they all should be weighted equally, because historically that's been what the town's been all about. So, like I say, about multiple overlaps in fisheries. Police came in saying, well, we already have 4 overlaps. Well, it's pretty easy to say that it's already in use, versus an area that only has 1 or 2. At least then we can narrow the scope to who we look at.
Yeah. You also want to identify everything else that's going on in the area too, not just fishing. So you want to identify recreational. It is shared water, so we want to identify all the uses. So I think doing what Paul said is, us taking the maps home, doing our own due diligence, and marking that up. Again, some of us don't have the information about where a guy's scallops or not, or whatever. So that'll be important, whether that's a workshop that we do,
Yeah, and then maybe
and try to open up. I think when this map was done, I remember there was a workshop, 3 or 4 of them at the Harpswell School, I think, and people spoke. This is what's going on there. So I don't know if that's something we do, but obviously this would have to be, if we updated this, it would have to be voted on at town meeting.
Yes.
Right? So we'd want to keep that in mind and try to get it done before next March. Usually in February it has to be kind of submitted or something.
Yeah.
I think the map is super, super important.
And as it stands now, the map has to go before the voters. Definitions can be changed by the select board after public hearing.
Right.
So you can make a map, and if you have small tweaks even after town meeting, that can still go through the select board.
I imagine we're gonna wanna draft some report or something at the end of this thing, so we may wanna, you know, one of my goals would be to kind of take stock, take an inventory of what we have. You know, I know Paul has some of that information, but I don't know if we want to be working on how many of each of these that we currently have in place, how many are actually in the works or in the queue, and then just identifying the number of, you know, miles of coast we have, you know, water access points. I mean, just trying to get an inventory of what we have.
And likewise with other, you know, commercial lobster licenses, shellfish licenses, and those things, and, you know, and then adding in things like you said, like restricted waterways and stuff.
Oh, it's a must.
But, yes, the map hasn't included in the past, but, and then I know, well, obviously, I mean, we all maybe know our own little area, but it might even be good to, like, you know, come up with a date that some of us could meet up and go, you know, we could go on Matt's boat and go out of the harbor and ride around, ride the shores someday and take stock of things, you know, and then we could go out of interstate, go on my boat someday, or we could go up down to Woodens and go with you guys and do the middle, you know, something like that, just to actually put our eyes on other things too, you know.
We can use a town boat. I just don't know if you want to be seen on it.
It might be a little cramped for us all.
I don't think you couldn't get a quorum on the boat anyways by meeting law, so it'd have to be a small group.
Yeah.
It'd be like a planning board visit, you know, you just out and about.
The other thing that would be a goal of mine is to try to get more information on how DMR makes the decision on reasonable or unreasonable. Like, it's just such a broad term, and so I don't know if we try to invite, I don't know if they come down and talk to us about that or the process. I mean, in the Harbor Waterfront Committee, we get, you know, 5 to 20, you know, like a month, and do the best job we can, but I would just like to just know a little bit more about the process, what they look for, like what is the actual information. Is it 5 or more comments, or just kind of understand that? I would like to know what that actually means in the application. It's very, very
Cole would
broad.
probably come out with you.
So Cole Canwit was a little frustrated at first because the department's issued letters about how moratoriums work. And at first, DMR wasn't very supportive of coming down and talking to anybody in the town. But the select board reached out, and it does sound like we can probably get Cole herself down here. She's number 2 in the department, so we can get her, well, in aquaculture.
I've sat at so many, because I mean, when I first started sitting on the lobster management town council, you know, there was that was like around the time within the first couple of years that they had that big lease in McCoy Bay. That was a big stink, and so and I don't know how many times they sent. You know, we had meetings at town council meetings that DMR would come and explain to us the whole, you know, go through all this, the whole process. It's, you know, it's like talking to a rock.
Well,
I mean, it's just.
I just think
it's
getting her
just
down here would be
terrible.
important. Is it one person there that's making the decision? Is it Pat that's making the decision? I mean, I just want to
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
like, should the town, if a public citizen has concerns, should they be going straight to Pat? You know, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Yeah.
Who ultimately, someone is making that decision. Someone is determining reasonable or unreasonable. I just want to know who's making the decision. Like,
Pat.
Pat.
I mean, it starts with Amanda Ellis. She's the department director. She is the former, not attorney, but the person who ran the public hearings. And but if it makes it past her, then it goes right up.
Yeah. If it's like a big stink, like, you know, McCoy Bay was, then it gets kicked all the way up to Pat.
But there must be a guideline that she follows to say yes or no. I mean, I just want, she's got to go by something.
The way that they've explained it to me is always that it's like, unless you can prove, like, more so than just saying I fished there, that one of these 7 things is unreasonably interfered with, then they have no choice but to grant the lease. They're obligated to grant the lease unless.
Well, there are other reasons the lease is denied, such as recently one was altered after final submission that killed it. Yeah, so but you're right, I mean,
Yeah.
it's the big criteria. But I think, I had the question, I think you're asking, what does unreasonable mean?
Yeah, I just wanted, someone has to make
Is
that
there-
decision. Someone in
But
that
is
office
there
has to make
a
that decision.
definition that's clearer than just unreasonable?
And we should include that in our report. If we have information from them, that should be in our report. The other thing we should do is find out, state law and shared resource. People always say it should be shared water. So where is that written in state law? I would just think we should include that in our work. Like that should be the guiding, thing here. That it is shared.
It's important because, I've made the claim, multiple times when it comes to offshore wind leases and stuff too. And it applies the same to aquaculture. And then, if commercial fishermen had been granted the same, opportunities now granted to foreign energy companies, we'd have had the whole thing leased up 100 years ago.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to get a lease. So, it really, it does matter, like you say,
It does
that
matter. But if it's state law,
we've been told for generations that it's shared, and then all of a sudden one person can have it and other people can't.
Yeah, from my own experience, I started in 17 looking for footprints. I invested almost 900 in the head of Middle Bay alongside Tim Johnson's lease. And once I realized what there was for the amount of product there on the bottom, I backed out of it, even after what I had invested. And I thought that at the time of it, he was foolish to pursue it based on that, and it was granted. The town of Brunswick was even involved in that process. Another footprint, an 8-acre footprint, I pursued, paid to have the mapping done and coordinates. I found out that it was, frequently bogeyed in, and so I backed out of that one. We have one right in front of us right now on the other side of Harpswell that I dove, and I invested, and I paid for mapping, and I realized the amount of product that was there, and my thoughts was an existing fishing ground that we have like a stone's throw from this footprint that I was interested in is the only reason why it's that good is because of the way the bottom comes up, and it's a constricted current. I backed out of that one. I've been over and over again trying to find the right spot where I am recognizing everything that I possibly can, and still try to, have a fun. So I think everybody should.
So your view is that you should never put a lease should never be located in that spot like that where the current's constricted?
Yeah. I mean, that gets constricted. The feed, the larval, that all gets constricted. That's intended for everything up within that body of water. You put something in front of it, I don't see how it can't. I don't see how it's not going to influence it. I don't see how it's not going to influence the current, the larval that's intended for. Of course it is. If you think it's not, you're kidding yourself.
Is that information easily found? I mean, can we find that information and get it on the map, or is that just...
Yeah.
You can't dye the whole town, obviously.
No, you can't. But, I mean, constricted currents, there's an app that aquaculturists use to identify constricted currents and, where the abundance of that feed is, to help pick your spot for a farm. So, yeah. Something that was intended for the immediate resource, I don't think you should be impeding. Just like you shouldn't impede navigation, you shouldn't impede ingress and egress of riparians. I don't know if that's too much to ask, but
the other thing we may want to do is actually seek out areas that we think are good places for, not just where you can't, but we may want to try to figure out, like, as a group.
Yeah.
Let's not just be no. Let's see, hey, let's try to find some space where we think it actually makes the most sense.
Oh, like our intertidal in Harpswell, we have desolation like beyond belief right now.
Right.
we really are limited where we actively harvest, where we can harvest, where there is actually any product, you know. It, like, to me, like, yeah, I'm surprised there isn't more interest in a title, but it's, aquaculture's all, I don't know, from what I see, based off feasibility, so, and.
I have a really good friend who's an oyster farmer down in Cape Cod in Wellesley, and in that town you can't operate on the top at all. They really believe in shared resource and shared waters.
Oh, yeah.
And so he can only operate from the bottom up to 22 inches. It's as high as he can go. He's in the intertidal, and he said that he's aware of only one topwater kind of close to there. But the majority of all the aquaculture and Wellesley oysters are, they're the crown jewel. Some would say they operate on the bottom. The first 22 inches is all they can operate.
Yeah.
Is that state law, or do you know?
I don't know a lot about it. I had like an hour conversation with them, but they really, really believe down there that, they want to share that space so people can swim and fish and all the other stuff going on there. But he's got 7 acres, and I think it's in front of the town. The town owns all this property, so they can operate in the intertidal there, obviously.
Yeah.
There's different, Sarah, but just like you said, there's places in town where the intertidal you would think would be a great.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is a place where we probably want to identify it.
Yeah.
Go here, because there's nothing else going on, and it's going to help.
Well, I mean, evolution, like shellfish have evolved to not only feed on algae, but all microbial life in that benthic habitat on the bottom. That's where they've evolved to exist in harmony with everything else around it. Now you're putting them up here, considering what they do. I don't see how you're not going to influence something.
We've asked people, during our committee meetings about why they want to go on top, and they said they need to be on top. They want to grow fast, this, that, and the other. I asked Jim, I said, you don't feel like that growing on the bottom is your at the disadvantage? He said, absolutely not. That's where they grow. That's where they do their best. They're protected, especially with storms and surges, and which we're seeing more of. Just interesting to hear that perspective. Like, all those guys down there fish on the bottom.
Yeah.
All of them. He's like, why would you ever grow on top? So, just my 2 cents.
It was the same thing for Rhode Island too.
Yeah.
It's all bottom culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely,
There's a reason why.
From everything that you've said, David, the last couple workshops and stuff, there's a lot of things to support.
Yeah.
Bottom culture being a more effective way to create a cohesive, environment with everything else going on around it.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, it's not it's not the economically most viable way to grow them, So, maybe we are able to identify places where bottom culture would be suitable, but top culture would, could be, a part of it. But I think we should look at every inch of water within the town, and identify it as,
That's why.
one thing or the other.
Yeah, that's why I think we should be highlighting constricted currents, because I don't think that's ever going to happen. Top culture is here to stay, and you are only going to see more of it. And I think the least we could possibly do is identify these constricted currents, these pinch points where you get a bottom that comes up and meanders into the intertidal. I think all of that right there should be identified and stayed away from, or get on the side of it.
So, David, I don't know if this is where you're headed, but at both workshops, I thought something that, not that we're there, but we might get to suggesting there's another criteria. That doesn't mean DMR will do it, but it could be a suggestion the town makes.
Yeah.
Just what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know how they'd react, but you're identifying this is an issue.
It's not that we don't need to. It's not that we're looking to create another criteria to try and force upon DMR, because they're not going to recognize that, because it's not part of the law. But it's more about using that as a criteria for ourselves to create a map that says this is a good place for it, this is not a good place for it, and just hope the DMR will abide by that, and not necessarily, you know.
Well, I get that. At the same time, if this group feels like that is something that would benefit, I mean, laws can be changed. Whether that's a good idea or not, I'm not saying that, but
Yep.
just that could be, if you wanna do something different by state, then you need to change state law.
Yep, I mean,
So I'm not saying we're there, but if that's where we got.
at the very least, I mean, if the group was interested in trying to, you know, push for a change in state law around the aquaculture leasing process, at the very least, you could try and push for, you know, something be added that said that the state had to give more, you know, heed to towns' ordinances on the subject, you know. Could be, without getting into specific details about, you know, this criteria and that criteria, you know, you could maybe have something that could be more broadly agreed upon by simply stating that the state had to take individual towns' ordinances into consideration when granting or denying a lease application.
Well, it'll be interesting to see where we get.
Yeah.
And it also wouldn't be pretty, but I'm just saying all options open.
Yes, get our representative over here.
Who is it anyway?
Cheryl.
Is she on the Shellfish Committee?
No,
Green resources.
Unfortunately, she's on inland fisheries. And housing.
And why do they do that? I thought that was Sarah Golden's plan. She took her 1 year off it and gave somebody from Hamden, Maine on the Marine Resource Committee.
There's always one,
Yeah,
but
there is. All right, this is a good place to hold up. Come up with a plan for next month.
Is there any direction for staff between now and?
Can you get us some information on what we have currently for leases and that type of stuff?
Yep.
I'd love to have that
Yep.
information.
You have all that between top and bottom fish?
Yeah, oh yeah, we can get
Yep.
everything.
Is that hard to find? I mean, not easy.
I can share how to find it, and I can also bring it.
Okay, that's real good.
That's what the state has. Oh, he's looking at one of the maps right now. Shows, is this all LPAs or standards or?
This has everything, but it's the color scheme. I used to like it when they had the yellows.
Yeah, they didn't have different color codes for different. Oh, that's a.
So now you got it.
That's a kelp lease there. Kelp farm. Hasn't been put in yet though. Really no. So the dots are LPAs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And other leases are shown in those like rectangles.
There's that new one they just came out with, break down the number? That one that Viewshed made or whatever, that consulting.
I didn't go back and double check that one.
I think that one, it broke it down by like number and percentage of area used and everything.
It did. That map that Matt sent out, that link.
Yeah, that
This
one's.
is that view shed.
It took me a bit to figure it out.
So it broke it down by municipality.
You know, I think if you clicked on like the municipality type of thing, it would give you.
Is that Viewshed?
Yeah, right there. 6 standard, 90 LPAs. And then like the total acreage and the percentage of the area and stuff.
That's pretty neat.
Because Harpswell had the most total number, but our area was not the most just because we have such a large amount of.
Yeah, you are from Freeport.
Yeah, we're-
covered with leases.
Yeah.
We got a lot of LPAs, but they just have a lot of leases.
Yeah, we just haven't really ended up with anything of great size.
No,
compared to
everything's small.
some of those other ones further, you know, obviously it's kind of like the head of the bay working out, you know. Ease of access is a big thing. There's not a lot of infrastructure. The town, like, you know, Freeport, say, has like a pretty big town dock with a hoist, blah blah blah. Like we don't have a town dock, you know, that you would run a commercial operation out of, you know, that, you know, so Freeport has a down dock that anyone can come down and hoist stuff in and out and back trailers down, and you can run a commercial shellfish operation out of Freeport down dock. But Harpswell doesn't have anything like that, so that would kind of prohibit it more from occurring, down towards South Harpswell and stuff like that. You got to have some way of somewhere to come and go out of, somewhere to make it happen. But.
So what's our plan next month? To come in and start working on the map, or?
I think the map would be a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, whenever that becomes available, and what do you think timeline-wise, as far as?
This kid's, I call him a kid. I mean, he's pretty good though. He's pretty good. So I don't think it'll take long.
Okay. Yeah, whenever.
I think you'll at least have a couple weeks to play with it before your next
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
You just sit there with his headphones on.
meeting.
It teaches how to do
Yeah.
So our next meeting would be the July 10th.
Part 4.
Yep. Seems to work pretty good.
So we should be thinking about if we want to add any more classifications and mapping, obviously, what information we want on the map. And then we'll just jump in and start doing it.
Did I send the waters classifications to everybody? If I didn't, I'll resend it. That map that I had up prior.
Yeah,
and the
It's pretty broad.
Yeah.
It's very broad.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good idea that something be done at the time, obviously, but now at this point,
Well, we took another look at it 7 or 8 years ago. I think that's when we had Darcy, when we were bringing her to do it. Maybe it's before you got here.
it just seems
Try to
like
get done.
something that's always resurfacing, rearing its ugly head, is just this. And so hopefully we can come up with something.
Well, that map was part of the harbor management plan. And in that plan, 2011, it talks about how the town should start getting prepared for future aquaculture.
Well, that was in 2011, right?
Yeah.
I think that was, I don't know if that was the first class, aquaculture shared waters class that you guys did at the land trust building.
It might have been, that was 2013 when we started.
2013. Okay, I was thinking it was 2011, but that was, I took that class, the first one at the land trust building. So, yeah, I've still got the big binder with all the stuff. So, yeah, it was, back then it was kind of like, this is coming, and then now it's just taken this long to reach a point where, there needs to be some more tools in place.
All right, we have to skedaddle. There's another group coming in. They're already here.
Thank you all.